Hey everyone, Tim here from SnapAttack. Let's dig into this week's threat snapshot. So earlier this week was Microsoft's Patch Tuesday, where again they fix a lot of vulnerabilities and security issues across their products in one rollup. And it's always interesting because shortly thereafter, it's known as Exploit Wednesday, when a lot of times, researchers, threat actors, they'll take a look, they'll start reverse engineering some of the patch diffs, they'll try and figure out what those exploits were. Sometimes you'll see things being weaponized after the fact, while there's still that vulnerable window between when the patch is released and when the patch is actually applied for organizations. And you also have sometimes 0 days that have been out in the wild that are finally getting patched, but are going to pick up a little bit more attention. So whenever you see a remote code execution, max severity critical, 9.8 out of 10 CVSS score vulnerability, affecting a very ubiquitous product like Microsoft Outlook, it's going to draw a lot of attention, draw a lot of eyes, just as this one did. So this one is kind of dubbed the Moniker link vulnerability, and there are some interesting characteristics about this. So very easy, low user interaction. They have to click just a link in an email. It can bypass the preview pane. Affects a lot of versions of Microsoft Outlook and Office. You can see this going back to 2016. And what I think gave a little bit more concern for a lot of people was, again, this timeline. So initially it was published. Shortly thereafter, they updated the exploit flag and exploit availability, saying that this was being exploited in the wild, which you can see here, that exploitability. So that was very concerning because people thought, hey, this is something that I need to actively defend against now. It put a lot of organizations on high alert. Microsoft reversed that, so you can see it's not exploited. Their exploitation assessment is unlikely. So, we'll dive into this. Let's learn a little bit more about this vulnerability, but I think there is a lot of, a lot of hype here that is unnecessary. So, they credit the original researcher, a Checkpoint. Let's go ahead and let's take a look at their blog post and learn a little bit more about this vulnerability. So they're calling this Moniker link, and this comes back to, again, some of the early days of Microsoft Windows and trying to create compatibility across programs. Built into Windows, there's this thing under the scenes called Common Object Model, and you can see how they use this in various things to pass information between tools. So one of the examples here is like a Skype URL. So if you want to make a Skype call and make that very friendly so that the Skype URL handler knows, oh, hey, I need to make a call, and maybe it's and call and say there's an equal sign this number. It's a way to kind of pass information between objects. So just like hyperlinks, you can pass information in a URL. You can do this to other programs. Makes for a very good and rich user experience. And there are some other ways that this can be used. So, using the file URL handler, we can access a remote file. In this case, it's going to be on an SMB share. And, there was something interesting that was seen, when they were doing this research. So by default, the file URL, it's going to say, hey, something wrong. There's a problem. I can't access this. Again, it's a good kind of security thing. But under the hood, there's this, what they're calling a Moniker URL or a Moniker link. And all it's doing is applying this exclamation point in something. So kind of like here we saw on that Skype where there was some additional information. That exclamation point internally to Windows is going to trigger some additional API calls to process that, because what it's trying to do is tell the file handler, hey, you have to do something with this document I'm about to pass. Not literally something, but again, it could be, built into the application, some other feature. So impact of this bug, what does this mean? At the very least, because we are opening up a remote file, it is going to leak NTLM credentials. So if you've got Impacket running or NTLM Relay X, you can capture those hashes, you can replay them, you can crack them, you can go about your business that way. So that is definitely very concerning. So at the very least, we can see this as, exposed credential access. It is here theoretically possible to, have remote code execution. They're going to talk about this because, again, Outlook is going to have that link. You're going to click it, and in this example, they're using a rich text format, RTF file, that by default with COM and the default association of the file types, Microsoft Word, if installed, is going to try to open. They were using, and what it looks like, trying to go back to a little bit older Microsoft CVE, which, if you remember back in the day, there was that font table format in RTF documents that would cause a crash, so you could kind of use that as a POC. I don't think that one was ever fully exploitable in terms of remote code execution. At least nobody released a POC for that. But they are going to show how you could get a crash there and how that remote code execution theoretically could be run. A couple of nuances here and some of the things that we saw when we were trying to replicate this threat. Because of that link, Windows is going to run the program in a COM server mode. So it's not quite the normal, Microsoft Word UI. We see this as well when we were trying to do other applications. They run, the file loads, but it doesn't quite behave as normal. So that said, with additional kind of research, there may be other opportunities for exploitation here that are successful. You can see the crash. You can see a little bit more information. Want to talk through a little bit more about this in terms of, attack complexity and, what the realistic threat here is. So, they noted here there's two more minor requirements for the Moniker attack link vector. One of them is that an exploit needs to work with Microsoft Word in COM server mode. So haven't seen any of those that are out there and published yet. So while that is, great to say a CVE has a 9.8 score, when it depends on another remote code execution or another code execution flaw that's going to equally be 9.8, is a little bit misleading and disingenuous. The second part is that the victim's network needs to allow outbound SMB in order for an external attacker to attack it. So sure, if they're already inside of your network, they could have an SMB server somewhere locally and steal credentials, but again, they're already in your network. So for this to be truly like wormable remote code execution outside the internet, I don't know many organizations that have outbound SMB open. This is kind of a non-starter from that point too. So I don't know that I would call those minor requirements. A lot of organizations are already pretty safe from this. So let's take that down a notch in terms of what the actual threat is. Last piece that I just want to say, and I hope this was a marketing person that was putting here, please folks, let's be realistic when we talk about something. In terms of its threat level. I know they're trying to make a comparison here to, Windows and COM ecosystem. This Moniker link is kind of like that, but please do not compare this to Log4j, not even close. I'm just going to leave it at that. All right, let's actually hop over to SnapAttack. Let's see what this looks like. So again, there really isn't a lot to the POC. The POC itself is just, again, the URL, and it has that Moniker link attached to it. You saw it in there. It's going to be, an RTF or some other document, and it's going to have that, exclamation point, that Moniker, and some other thing attached to it. So the rest of it is up to the user or the attacker to figure out how they want to, put that together. We've got a Linux server here, and we're just running, Impacket. We're going to go through this with two different examples here, and I'll make this full screen and we'll kind of talk through this. Got Process Monitor up because, again, we said that Outlook is going to open those utilities in a COM server mode, so we're not going to see as much of the UI and we're not going to see some of the behaviors, but we want to prove under the hood that that file is getting accessed and that things are getting done. The other thing we want to just kind of note is, again, it's because it's operating in COM server mode, it's not necessarily going to run all of the other things afterwards. So let's take a look at this. So we've got Outlook. We've got this, malicious email that has been sent to us. We'll hop ahead. Okay, SnapAttack, we've got some important install links. Can ignore that security issue. That's just on our local Exchange server. And when we open this up, we're going to see two install links. Again, they got the Moniker links. These are files hosted on an SMB server on our Linux host. And I'm going to kind of pause here. We're going to talk through this first one. So the first one was a HTA file. So compiled HTML application. By default, it's going to launch with MSHTA since that's a default file handler. You're going to see, if we keep playing the video, that, MSHTA loads. We still do see, and this was a little bit different than what was reported in the Checkpoint article, we still do see that alert, but MSHTA was launched in the background. We saw that run. We'll see that on the process graph. We can see that our credential hash is being sent over here. That file is shared. So by all intents and purposes, that link worked. We'll dive into a little bit more what that looks like in a minute. Let's try this again with WinWord, just like they said. So this time we're going to open an Office document, and we'll click link number 2. Hit play. So like we said, that's going to open Microsoft Windows, Microsoft Word up in COM mode. It's going to open kind of behind the scenes. So we will see it launch right here. We won't see the UI. Part of why I think they hinted that this required a little bit more complicated exploit to work is because you're really exploiting Word without opening all of the the file piece to it. So again, this is going to make this a lot more complex to actually use in theory. It's not like I can just shove a macro in the document and everything is going to work out magically. So Word did launch as well. We'll take a look at that on the process graph, but you kind of need a 0-click interaction exploit in that stage, that second stage, in order to get on with the rest of the campaign. So a little bit scary when you think about it, but at the same time, a lot of tried and true detections that we're going to talk about. This is detectable. Let's take a look at the process graph. So a couple of different theories. Originally, when we heard this, it's like, okay, let's take a guess. What are those evergreen detections that we're going to see? Had a bet that it's going to be a suspicious child process of an Office product like Outlook, and well, wouldn't you know, Outlook is spawning MSHTA when you click. That works for some things, but we also clicked a link with Microsoft Word, and that one didn't record Outlook as the parent image. So just keep that in mind. That might not be a full indicator. One of the things that we know is going to happen, though, is that either of these products are going to have to reach out to an SMB share to access that file. So that's going to be something that's interesting. We can talk about that in a minute. But in terms of process graph, process relationships, works about 50% of the time here. Trying to see what other people on the internet have seen. Omer here had an interesting one. This is a Azure Microsoft Sentinel KQL query. If you have email monitoring, you can possibly use this as a diagnostic. So looking for the email URL info and click events where it's going to have that Moniker link. So you've got the file and then you've got that exclamation point here. Could be a good strategy. If you have other log sources available, we'll talk about a couple other detection strategies here too. So Microsoft Outlook is going to have application logs that will be logged to the local machine. If you are collecting and seeing those, that could be an opportunity. So we've got this here. This is a event code 25. And we see that error, something unexpected happened with this, and we can see that file, that Moniker link. Again, there's a little bit of a discrepancy here. The original research was saying that that error wouldn't necessarily be seen. However, we're seeing that in ours. However, it's still working. Might just be a difference in what version of the Office product was being used, but this could be again, another endpoint log that we would have the availability for. Probably the best detection that you're going to have is looking at suspicious SMB connections. This could be a good hunt query. This could be operationalized as an alert, depending on the context here. So, in this example, we're looking at something that is going to launch a system. Again, this is being started as a comm server reaching out over 445. We're just saying, hey, this doesn't have a destination host name, and maybe it's got an IP address that is or isn't in our network. If you're looking for remote attackers, your internal IP space, some of your other IPs, you could just, update and tune that rule to say, tell me anything that's going outbound. And again, that would be probably a great evergreen detection that you could use in your, organization, because you shouldn't have those kind of outbound SMB connections. So that would be something that could be useful as well. A couple others that are, again, a little bit more, evergreen. From the Sigma community repo, suspicious Outlook child processes. Anytime Outlook spawns anything weird, in this case, Outlook spawned MSHTA, so That would be something, again, works sometimes, doesn't work all the time. In this case, we didn't see Outlook spawning, windward. You win some, you lose some, but there are other things that you could do. Think about this from a post-exploitation standpoint. So, as soon as that Office document loads, if there was theoretically some other remote code execution, 0-click with Microsoft Word, that you give it a malicious RTF file and it's going to, get code execution, you could use something like this. Again, another Sigma community rule, looking for an Office application that's making an external IP, like an internet connection. This would probably be going back to, that C2 server, downloading a stage 2, getting that, and getting C2 loaded up. So something like this, again, another good detection that you could have in your arsenal, good for hunting. You could operationalize this with some tuning. But ultimately, just kind of want to, tone down the volume a little bit on this. Again, there are lots of detections that have been out there, lots of good evergreen ones that, when a CVE comes out, chances are there's going to be already some detectability that you have if you have a good foundation out there, and SnapAttack can help you with that. So that's our threat snapshot for this week. It is a weekly series. Be sure to like, subscribe, comment below the video, and we'll see you next time.